This past Sunday, on the 21st of April, Queen Elizabeth II turned 93 years old. Earlier this year, on the 6th of February, she completed 67 years of reign, being the head of the British monarchy since 1952. She's now the longest reigning monarch in Britain, ahead of Queen Victoria, who previously held the record with 63 years. To get an idea of how long she's been in power, she has met 11 US presidents: Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, Ford, Jimmy Carter, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, so pretty much all presidents since 1951, and 5 popes: Pius XII, Pope John, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis, who apparently she gifted a bottle of whiskey to. On an international level, she's number 4 on the list of longest reigning monarchs in history, behind the current king Bhumibol of Thailand at 69 years, Johann II of Liechtenstein at 70 years, and Louis XIV of France, who ruled for 72 years. But she's in first place for female monarchs, and hey, she's still in the race, so she might catch up and take the number 1 spot. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born on the 21st of April of 1926, daughter of the Duke and Duchess of York, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth I. This is interesting because her father, King George, wasn't meant to be king. He was the second son of George V, and his brother Edward was supposed to take the throne, which he did, but then being forced to abdicate less than a year later because of a constitutional crisis due to his marriage to a 2-time divorced American woman. There were also some suspected German sympathies, which I'm guessing didn't help his situation. So George, Elizabeth's father, became king. During World War II, then Princess Elizabeth was very young, and it was suggested that her and her sister should be evacuated to Canada for safety. This was rejected by her mother, who declared, "The children won't go without me. I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave." In 1945, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service and trained as a driver and mechanic. Recently, she revealed that on the day of victory in Europe, she and her sister went out anonymously into the streets of London to celebrate the end of the war with everyone else. In 1947, she married Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, a former prince of Greece and Denmark, and had 4 children. During 1951, her father's health declined, and Elizabeth frequently stood in for him at public events. She then embarked on a tour of the British Commonwealth, traveling to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Africa. In fact, she was in Kenya when in 1952 she received the news that her father had passed away and she was now the queen. An interesting fact is that it was advocated by some that the royal family should change its name from the House of Windsor to the House of Mountbatten because of Prince Philip, the Queen's husband. However, it's said that Winston Churchill refused to allow it as Prime Minister and issued a declaration stating that it would remain House of Windsor. After becoming Queen, she went on another 7-month round-the-world tour, visiting 13 countries. She became the first reigning British monarch to visit Australia and New Zealand. During the tour, crowds were gigantic, and 3/4 of the population of Australia were estimated to have seen her. Throughout her reign, she's made hundreds of state visits to other countries, and she is now the most widely traveled head of state. At this time, the British Empire had already come to an end, but the British Commonwealth was recent, and so Elizabeth became the queen of 7 different countries: the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan, and Ceylon. She witnessed the decolonization process of over 20 countries in the 1960s, and eventually South Africa, Pakistan, and now Sri Lanka went under reforms, which removed the British Queen as their head of state. But the former British colonies were not the only ones to undergo reform. The UK itself, under their new Queen, also changed a few things about its monarchy. In 2011, for instance, the gender preference rule was abolished, which previously stated that any male heir would have preference to the throne, even if he had older sisters. Monarchs are also no longer prohibited from marrying sparing Roman Catholics, but Catholics are still prohibited from ascending the throne. As for the current roles of the Queen, she is the Supreme Governor of the Church of England. An interesting fact is that the Queen still uses, as part of her title, Defender of the Faith, a title granted by Pope Leo X to King Henry VIII in 1521. She is the British head of state, appointing the Prime Minister and also being the Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces. In 1991, the Queen became the first British monarch to address a joint meeting of the United States Congress. And when she addressed the UN in 2010, the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon introduced her as an anchor for our age. In the 1990s, republicanism in the UK grew. As a response, new reforms were made, including the Queen paying income tax and a reduction in the civil list, the royal family individuals which receive money from the state. And polls from 2007 show that around 70 to 80% of the British public supported the continuation of the monarchy. Recent reports state that the Queen does not intend to abdicate, although younger royal family members are taking up more public engagements as she grows older. So, what do you think? Will the UK remain a kingdom in the future? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, remember to subscribe.